What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to yet again another Sales Hacker webinar. And today we have a very, very, very special guest. He is a entrepreneur. I think he's been an entrepreneur for almost 20 plus years now, making his own way for himself in the SEO industry, selling SEO services. He's also a good friend of mine. He's the owner of Evolving SEO, and he's also the host of the Experts on the Wire SEO podcast. It is the #1 SEO podcast in iTunes. It's the most actionable and in-depth SEO podcast out there. So if you're looking to learn a little bit about that, feel free to go and check out Dan's podcast. But Dan, I'm gonna let you kind of jump in here and introduce yourself to our audience, man. Welcome to the webinar.
Yeah, Gaetano, it's so great to be on the webinar. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks to Sales Hacker. Yeah, so I'm excited to talk about sales. Like you said, I've been doing this almost 20 years, and I never thought of myself as a salesperson. So you're probably going to hear some things that might sound a little contrary, out of the box. Like, I don't know sales, so I don't know what's right or wrong. I just know what's worked for me in real life, like in real business. So I'm excited to share all those things I've learned in like the last 20 years.
Yeah, awesome. And for the audience listening, for today, what we really want to do is provide you with an outside perspective from somebody who's been very, very successful at building his own personal brand. Dan, I'm not gonna like put too much shine on you, but why don't you tell the listeners, some of your podcast stats, some of the stuff that you're doing. What are some of those things you've been doing on the personal branding side that has driven some of these results for you, man?
Sure. Yeah, I'll back up to my slide here. So the podcast has been out 2 years. It was a slow growth, but we're up to the point where each show gets 3,000 or more downloads, some up to 5,000. We've had over 2,000 total downloads. I've had almost 100 episodes with guests from like Rand Fishkin to Noah Kagan to Annie Cushing, the analytics expert, and John Mueller from Google. So that's been great. And also just really slowly and steadily over the long term, working away on things like Twitter, LinkedIn, like you said, just really trying to grow the following with the reputation of someone that likes to help people. Like I'll answer almost anyone's question on Twitter. I often will answer people's questions in my YouTube videos. So I'm really out there just trying to help and like let people know that if they have a quick question, obviously I can't consult for free, but if it's a quick little question over Twitter and I can retweet it and shares value with everyone else, then I'm happy to answer that. So I really just built this up just by really trying to be helpful over like the last 10 years.
Right. And that's the perfect segue that we're going to get into today. Like if you're an account executive at a software company, you should, this webinar is really going to help you think more like an entrepreneur and get away from maybe some of that traditional thinking like, well, it's not really my company, it's not my brand or whatever. I'm just kind of a rep in a bigger ecosystem of fish in an ocean. But this is going to help you transition into that entrepreneurial mindset as a sales rep selling software. And I think there's going to be some really interesting takeaways. But before we get into the whole webinar stuff, I do want to also mention that this is being recorded for sure. So if you need to drop off at any point, you will get a recorded follow-up email with this and the deck included. And if you don't want to miss anything, just go onto our YouTube channel and subscribe to Sales Hacker on YouTube because we'll be posting the webinar recording there as well. And hit us up on SlideShare, follow us there because we'll upload the deck to not going to miss anything in case you need to drop off.
So why don't we jump right into part number 1, which is talking about first impressions. And I want to begin by sharing a very quick client horror story.
Please do. I'm dying to hear this as well.
Yeah. So I'm going to read an excerpt of an email that I received from a client that I had been working with for about 4 or 5 months. Now, I received this email in about September of 2015. So this is the past. It's kind of behind me. Now, no one got sued or anything, so it's not like that bad, but I'm going to read a little excerpt here. Okay. The email to me said, overall, as a general impression, Evolving SEO's work has not met our expectations. I'm sure you know your stuff, but so far we haven't seen the degree of commitment, execution we were expecting, or the speed at which we were hoping you'd execute. And it goes on, and he talks about some other things. Yeah, and he says, clearly your outreach templates didn't meet our quality guidelines. We've invested a lot of resources, both time and cash, in the buyer's guide. We don't have a clear path to promote this big piece of content. We want to keep working with you, but we need things to turn around 180%. And there's a lot more there, but basically, this is probably the worst feeling I've ever had, and the worst email I've ever received providing SEO consulting.
Right.
But the reason I bring it up, this was not a service problem. This was a sales problem, because even more than it being I sold the wrong service, but more important, it was a bad personality match. And from the very beginning, from the very first phone call, the very first sales call that I had with this client, I knew deep down they were not a good match for me. I knew they were not a good personality match. I knew that because if you sell a service to somebody that even if you misquote or misestimate the service, if they're a good personality match, you can work things out. So like, even if you mess up like the what's on paper, you can still figure things out together.
Right. Now, to the degree of personality matching, though, like I can really say that this is an issue for sure, because my personality, like as a buyer, is somebody that likes to be hyper engaged. I like a little bit of rapport building in the beginning, but it has to be genuine and authentic. Like I was just on a sales demo today, and there was totally a personality mismatch. The sales rep was totally like monotone. He was ice cold, and that's just bad practice in general. But I could tell that the personalities like did not match. So like, what do you think like some takeaways could be for a software sales rep who can kind of almost figure out intuitively like there might not be a personality match there? What could they do to kind of build some of that rapport early and not let the bad personality mismatch dictate the result of that call?
Yeah, before we get to building rapport, I made a habit since that painful experience of doing one thing in the first 5 seconds of every phone call. I jot down my first impression of whoever I'm talking to.
Okay.
And now I'm not jotting down my judgment of them. So I'm not going to jot down like, oh, this person sounds like a jerk. Like I'm not trying to cast judgment. What I jot down at the top of the sales paper, my notes, is how did this person make me feel in the very first moment of talking to them? Did I feel safe, comfortable? Did I feel maybe intimidated? Did I feel maybe rushed? Did I feel like they're distracted? How did I feel in those first moments? And people's first impression shouldn't be their only shot. You should give people another chance. But I just made it a habit to jot that down, because then as I'm thinking through the call and then even going back to review my notes later, I can refresh my memory to what was that first thing I felt when I first encountered them. And that's been a great takeaway.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. Yeah. So software salespeople on the call right now in the audience, jot down that first impression and then revisit it later. I'm sure, Dan, if you revisit that, you say, wow, like that was totally different than what my first impression was, or maybe it is consistent throughout, you know?
Yeah, that's been invaluable. Now to actually get to how to read people at first and not only read a first impression, but give a first impression, you jot down your gut reaction. But the other thing too is I'd recommend is I bucket people into two personality types. I know things aren't black and white as this, but I try to figure out if somebody is fast and they want to get to the facts, or if they're the person that gets to want to know you. Is this the person that's going to want to like chat with you and like learn about like, you know, how did you get into SEO and like, what do you think about like Black Hat, like whatever it is. So it's two buckets of people. The person that wants to get to the facts, I'm going to get to the facts with them quickly. The person that wants to chat, I'm going to spend time building that rapport. And it's just a matter of like, you listen to the first few words they say. And oftentimes, like, I'm just thinking in my memory right now, but somebody that wants to get to the facts is going to just jump right in with like the problem they have or a question. The person that wants to chat a little is going to like, oh, where are you? What did you, what did you eat today? Like, they're going to be more conversational in the first sentence or two. So I really try to feel out that pace and then let that guide the actual call for the duration of it.
That is super, super important, because I will tell you, I manage a 15-person remote team. I was on that sales demo today, earlier this morning, and I started the conversation by saying, look, I don't have a lot of time. Let's skip the company overview bullshit. Let's get right to the stuff. I told them specifically, I'm looking for a tool that's going to help me automate my processes on social media. And it took forever to get to the meat and potatoes. So like, not only did he disconnect with what I wanted, but he ended up wasting my time by feature vomiting all over me that I didn't really care about all the other stuff. And that's what you just said, you know, like you have to be able to pick out these people in the beginning. Do they just want to get to the point, or do they want to kind of, hey, where you know, what are you doing type thing? So I really appreciate that takeaway.
Yeah, and then now let's shift to how you can cast a first impression, because I think this is even more powerful. I'm going to break this down into three things: sound, sight, and context.
Okay.
Sound is the most important thing because oftentimes, as we're going to talk about, most of these sales calls are calls. There's no video. So you actually only have the sound of your voice to convey the first impression to somebody. So here's what I do, and here's what I recommend everyone else think about. You actually try to tune in to the person that's on the other line. Now, I know this sounds all fluffy and stuff, but there's 5 ways to break it down sound,
okay,
and ways you can use your voice to cast certain impressions. And really, the bottom line of all this, what I'm trying to do, is they call it mirroring, right? You try to you've heard of mirroring where you try to mirror
Yes.
somebody's body language. This is like sound or voice mirroring. Now, I'm not using this as a technique. I'm actually trying to tune in to that other person. And the 5 ways to do this are with pitch, tempo, volume, sustain, and staccato. And you know all these.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so quite often, for example, not always, it's not black and white, but oftentimes if I'm talking to a woman, I'll raise the pitch of my voice a little bit because
Okay.
I'm going to match her. I don't want to sound like I'm, dominating too much. But if I'm
Right.
talking to a man, especially a man that I can tell is a bit, let's call it alpha or a little bit more of a
The type
dominant
A?
personality, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah.
lower my voice. I'm going to make sure that I'm like talking with resonance.
Okay.
And so you can vary the pitch. Yep.
Right. So where does the staccato break into? And so for people that don't know, the Italian music terms, legato is like you kind of elongate your phrasing, and then staccato, you just like short to the point. You're talking like this. Break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. If I'm talking to a New Yorker, I mean, listen to Gary Vaynerchuk talk. It's very percussive. Percussive. He enunciates his P's. There's nothing held out, right? So if I'm talking to somebody that, again, is maybe a little more dominant from New York, or somebody that talks fast or talks a little loud, I'm going to use a little more staccato to tune into them, but also even to drive a point home as well. You can use staccato to like emphasize something. Sustain. If you're talking to somebody from California is going to be a little slow. They're going to like drag out the words a little bit longer. So these things you should just be in tune with.
So Dan, we had a question from someone.
Yes.
And the question was, so what was the real outcome of why that client wasn't satisfied with the results after 6 months? Was it truly because of a personality mismatch? Is that the blame for not delivering quality work, or was it something else that you uncovered later on?
I think it was a fundamental misunderstanding of working style. Now,
Okay.
I did sort of misalign the services that I thought I wanted to provide and what they were expecting to get. I mean, sure, that was a part of it, but I spent hours and hours and extra days trying to turn things around and make a better impression for them, putting together extra dashboards, doing extra work. I did a month of free work for them.
Wow.
And offered if they ever wanted free advice to follow me up, lifetime value, like just follow me up. So I did things 10 times as hard to try to please them. I put in 10 times the hours as I normally would, but
Right.
that I just kept hitting a wall because they were not getting the style of service that they had hoped for.
Right. So that kind of feeds into the next question from David Perry. David wants to know if it does start off with a bad impression, like what are some takeaways? I know you mentioned doing some extra work for free, but like if you're like a software sales executive and you start off with a really bad impression, what are some things that they might be able to do for that customer, that prospect, to kind of get back on track and get the gears back on the rails?
Yeah, I think for software it is a little different. I've never sold software, full disclaimer. I think selling service is a little bit different because you actually have to work with that person on a more close level after you've sold the thing. But I think to get back on track, I mean, what I'm going to get into a little bit is part 3 of the first impression is finding context. And we're going to get to that in a moment. So why don't I kind of circuitously answer that in one moment? I want to talk real quick about sight. So we're talking about voice. Now, if you want to try to give a first impression with sight, we're on a webcam here. Number 1 rule, show your hands. You see how my hands are up? I'm showing my hands. You're just showing that, show your palms. You have nothing to hide. You're not, like if my hands are back here, you're like, what's that guy doing? What's he doing? What's he got behind his back there? Yeah. So
Right.
again, you might not always have the opportunity to do a video call, but if you do, or if you meet somebody in person, that's why we shake hands, right? It's like you're showing somebody that you're not going to harm them. Now,
Right.
this might be controversial. I actually think eye contact does not matter as much as many people have said that eye contact matters. I think what matters is communicating that you are paying attention to the other person. And you don't have to do that with eye contact. You can do that, for example, on this webinar. I'm going to be looking at my other screen over here.
Right.
You can do that on a screen share by telling somebody. I make a joke. I go, I don't have like a wandering eye. I'm just looking at my other screen over here, but I am paying attention. So I think you can convey that you're paying attention with other means besides just purely eye contact.
Got it. So
Yeah.
for the account executives on the webinar, I'm just curious, how many of you guys use your face and screen share as well as your product at the same time? Just drop a quick yes into the question box if you do that. I'm just curious to see how many people do that. We already got a bunch of them flowing in. 1, 2, 3, 2 no's, 1 yes. Yes, we did. We saw video chat. Nope. Okay, it looks like a good mix. I see yes, no, yes, no, yes, yes, no. Wow. Okay, interesting. All the time, maybe. Interesting. All right, so it looks like there's a good, well balance here. I thought I was going to see a resounding yes or a resounding no, but based on what I'm seeing here from the audience, it looks like it's a good mix of yes and no's and a few maybes as well.
Yeah. So I want to answer the second person's question with the third part of making a good impression, which is finding context. So if you do start that call and you have a bad feeling or a bad first impression, you do have the chance to connect again. And there's a few ways to do this. I try to connect with either a common place, maybe like a school, connect by a mutual contact that you might have, or even knowing somebody at the same company where they know somebody else at the same company, or connect with an experience. So like the experience could be as small as like, hey, we had this bug in our Google Analytics, and like, oh, I had that bug. Or like, hey, have you been to that restaurant, or do you like this sports team? So you try not to do this superficially, but when you connect with somebody within the first few minutes of meeting them, you have a more favorable memory and impression of that person forever. So I remember meeting somebody, I'm not going to name who it was, but I met somebody once who was the wife of somebody well-known in SEO. And this is a little thing you can do, by the way. When you first say hello to somebody, say hello to them as if they're your long-lost best friend. Hey, how are you? How's it going? You know, pretend you've known them. Yeah, pretend you've known them for years. Now, this person that did this to me and then gave me the cold shoulder ever since then, I don't know why, so I'm a little bitter about that. But that's something you can do to connect with somebody, to make them feel like you can actually convince somebody that they feel like they know you. If you actually approach them like you already know them. And you can do that with how you greet them.
Yeah. I do that at conferences. Like I'll walk up to people, I have no idea who they are, and I'm like, hey, man, how you been? And they're like, oh, good. And then the conversation starts flowing just like that. So I think that's a good tactic.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into Teach First Sell. I'm really curious to hear about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is this webinar at a core and how I sell things at the core. And it really is all about mindset. It is a mind game because I think we can all get into the trap where I can say to myself, oh yeah, like I can superficially say, I want to teach and like give value and etc. But here's my tip for everyone, and the way that I actually realized that I do this when I was preparing for this webinar. I actually, even if it's just for a few seconds, I visualize myself in the feeling of what it feels like to help somebody and how that feels good. And that might sound like trite or fluffy or a little bit weird, but I'm actually trying to imagine myself feeling good helping somebody rather than, oh, I just want to close the deal. And I think what that does is that gets me out of my ego and wanting to just like sell and make money. And it gets me into like actually that mindset of trying and wanting to help somebody. So that's what I recommend, is actually visualize the result that you want.
Yes. I really like that. And then like to that point, like what's the process of like accurately diagnosing what they're really after, and then avoiding like those seller-centric behaviors, like rather than diagnosing and then coming up with a prescriptive solution, you know, how do you kind of go about doing that?
It's tough. I mean, this is definitely where we're getting into the like being in the moment and into the art of it, and just like reading somebody in that moment. I
Yeah.
think I just try to really listen, and that's something I didn't mention in the notes here. But I mean, the fundamental of all selling is listening, right? Like I really just try to listen to what that person wants, and I try to listen by reading the email they sent to me ahead of time. Like I try to intuit, okay, where on the path of purchasing is this person? Like, are they like, if somebody's come from a referral and they say, I have this exact problem, and they even insinuate they're ready to begin, I'm not going to like back them all the way up to like, oh, here's SEO and here's like these tools. Like, I
Right.
know they're down that path, right? But if
Right.
somebody's like, oh, we're starting to look into SEO for our company, we have a few questions. Like if I'm feeling that they're trying to learn, they're in the learning phase, then I'm going
Okay.
to apply more teaching.
Right. So basically, you're asking these open-ended questions up front to really try to diagnose what it is they're after. So, for example, if someone's selling software sales, selling a software to, I don't know, marketers, right? Asking those sort of like, what are you really trying to get out of this tool up front allows you to kind of laser point to the part of the presentation that they're really after the most, rather than just kind of open-ending and going through this whole big spiel of here's everything that we do and, here's why it can help you.
Yeah, exactly. I reached out to Stat. They provide SEO, rank tracker, really a high quality rank tracker. I reached out to them and I just told them, look, I want to buy your tool, but I just need a little bit of coaching on it. So they knew that that's what I was looking to get out of that call.
Yeah.
One thing I want to mention, and it's the second bullet point in Teach versus Sell, is that I used to be of the mindset where I was one extreme. I was like always just wanting to teach and thought that you should just teach. And if they wanted to buy, they'll come to me and they'll initiate and they'll tell me they want to buy. But what I've learned is some people actually want to be sold. And what I mean by that is you need to, it's like Gary, I mentioned Gary again, but he's got the great metaphors, jab, 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 right hook. You have to know when somebody wants you to land the right hook and to actually like tell them the value that you can add to solve their problem. And so when I'm selling my SEO, I've learned that I actually need to like, come in at the right moment and tell them, well, here's all of the types of ROI you're going to get from my services. And that's a really necessary ingredient. So, but it's just a matter of feeling out when the right time to do that is.
Okay, awesome. So we have two things coming from the audience. Thank you very much, Jessica Souter. Just a top tip and takeaway from her. What she does before going into some of these discussions is she tries to find something that they may have done on the web, like a recent article that they may have written. She'll look for some type of company award. I know one thing that I do is I scour TechCrunch very, very often, and I look for companies that may be rolling out new products or may have raised a round of funding. And I'll just simply reach out and I'll say, hey guys, congrats on that latest round. We really wish you the best of success, and if we can help you in any way, don't be shy to hesitate to ask. So that's a great tip from Jessica Souter. Thanks for chiming that in. The question is from Bill Miller. He says, a lot of times on demo calls, the buyers are confused. So this is aligning the sales process back to where the buyer is in their journey. Sometimes they're on that demo not because they're really ready to make a purchasing decision and they want to know features, but maybe it's that they're trying to get educated on the market. So is that the appropriate time to say, here's how we can compare it to other softwares in the industry and really take that teaching approach to kind of show them what's out there and show how yours kind of stacks up? Or do you kind of go into that selling point right there? Like, how do you kind of balance that whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said, and if we're reading the question correctly, if it feels and sounds like they're not ready to buy, then I might sell a few value points and sell a little bit, but I do it very passively. I don't get aggressive about it. That is where I would switch to not only teaching, but asking more questions, because if they're confused, if you allow somebody to talk through a problem, they're going to almost sometimes solve that for themselves. So actually, one thing everyone should know is, like, I've sold things by just like getting on the phone and sitting back and listening. They talk through the problem. They figure out what they want just because I'm like a psychologist in that case. Like, they have somebody just to talk through their problem with. I listen. I echo it back to them. I reassure the decision that they've made. and then they decide to buy something. So sometimes that's like just back off and listen a little bit.
Right, yeah. That makes perfect sense. I mean, it could be negative actually. If you try to sell them and they're not ready to buy, they can view you as someone who's too pushy. But there's plenty of great ways to kind of just understand that you can maybe mark this in your CRM or whatever, but this person is going to be a longer term deal. It's going to be a longer sales cycle. They're not ready, but you shouldn't give up on them just because, they weren't ready to buy right then and there. There's plenty of ways to nurture them. That's where you kind of work with marketing to say, look, this person was looking for more education. Let's get them into the appropriate drip funnels in the marketing automation. Let's re-engage with them on social and really do that whole sort of longer omni-channel approach to the sales cycle.
And the last part that I'll mention about teach versus sell before we get to the next slide is there is a slight danger that you hinted at this a minute ago, like if you start talking about competitors, there's a slight danger in that, right? Like you might lose people. I had a little story here where I was scrolling LinkedIn about a month ago. I came across a post where this guy was talking about how SEO is dead and he's grown their traffic without SEO in the past few months, and it's got a lot of comments and people going, yeah, SEO is dead, etc. But I was like looking at his name and I'm like, I know that guy's name. So I searched his name in my inbox and I realized he reached out to me for SEO services like 2 months before that.
Right.
I did like an hour or two of calls with him and I actually taught him what I would have done for him for content marketing and SEO to grow his traffic. And I actually gave him a topic idea or two and I looked at his blog and he had used those topics that I gave him. He took my free advice and teaching because I was teaching in order to try to sell. He did the SEO himself, and then he goes on LinkedIn and talks about how SEO is dead and you don't need it.
Oh my gosh. So he took your free advice, used it, and then bashed you.
Yeah, without mentioning me. So, those are the things that can happen, but, net, it's been a real win to take that approach. So those things happen very little.
Yeah, so we have some more questions coming in. This one is from Timothy. How do you kind of show the prospect the business benefits that they'll receive versus the product features? And do you think that like marketing really has to like play a role in that? Like what's the whole kind of process behind all that from your perspective, Dan?
Yeah, I like to break it into two things. There's the tangible, concrete, like money, and then there's sort of the emotional or the abstract. So I try to convey both. With money, I have a way to calculate if you spend this much on SEO, here's typically what you receive. The part people don't like is SEO is a long-term game, as you know. It's 6 to 12 to 18 months. So, but I tell them it's like, it's what I've been saying lately is it's slow, what do I say? It's slow churn, but it's high ROI, right? So it's like upfront, but then you get it down the line. That part's almost the easy part to convey because it's numbers. You can just say, look, if you put this in, here's what you might get out. The part that's sometimes a little harder to convey is to make them feel safe, to ease their like concerns. And there's a bunch of ways to do that, but I'll show testimonials. That's a huge thing. I'll even, referrals, giving people referrals is a big deal too.
Right. And I think you have case studies handy as well that you share, and do you share those maybe before or after?
Yeah, I have a few on my website. It needs a lot of updating, but I do share some. I will just send people screenshots and like just tell them, even like a simple screenshot. Look, here's a piece of content we did. This is what we did, and here's what happened. Like that can go a long way. And
So Cecilia also wants to know. Can the teach and sell technique kind of thing that you outlined, Dan, can that be used if you're trying to bring back somebody as a client? So like maybe in the case that you may have lost a client, is it worth trying to re-spark that relationship? Or maybe can it just be used for a client that maybe has gone dark or a prospect that has gone dark on you? Can you use like some knowledge to kind of reignite those conversations and get things going?
I find with somebody that's been a client, what works a little bit better is doing something a little extra for them, like for free, and then sending that almost like I pretend they've hired me already again, and I do like a little bit of work and send that, and that's one way. That's like the positive reinforcement. Like, look, if you hire me again, I'm going to do this for you. But the other way, actually, and this works really well on SEO, is to show them a problem. You find like a ranking that's dropped or traffic that's dropped or a competitor that's gotten higher, that part is a little bit more like selling, but
Yeah.
you're a little more in the know and in the weeds with them, especially if you still have access to their data. So finding like a problem that you can help solve is a good way to do that.
Yeah, I like that. And if let's say you're selling software, and let's say you're selling a data normalization tool or a data standardization software that will clean your data. How proactive should the account executives be in connecting with that prospect before the call to maybe get a sample of their data so that they can show an example of like what the tool can actually do? Like, do you recommend going that far out, or do you recommend kind of just getting on the call, really diagnosing everything, and then going through the process of proving that ROI versus feature benefit?
Yeah, I try to figure out what's going to take the least amount of time for that person, because asking somebody to send data, you might actually be causing a roadblock by doing that.
Right.
Because it's friction where now they've got to do, you're giving them work to do.
You're giving them work to do. Right.
Whereas what I find, especially nowadays where everyone's so distracted by email, if I nail down somebody for a phone call on a certain date, even if it's 10 minutes, and walk them through something on a call, I find someone's far much more willing to commit to that than this, they got to go find the data and they don't have the password, or so I kind of like the phone call approach. That's just me though, but I think that can be very effective.
Yeah, I'm a fan of that too. And then you have a bullet point here that's talking about you left your notifications on again during screen share, and it bit you in the butt. What happened with that?
Yeah. So before I made these slides, something had happened a few months ago, but something worse just happened a few days ago. I made a worse mistake. So I was on a call with a potential client. I thought it went really, really well. It was like an hour phone call. I talked them through the whole thing. I was sharing on my second screen like you see here.
Okay.
We get to the end of the call, and a reason I'll explain a little while later, I moved my browser over to my other screen, and behind that was my iChat messages, in which I was just chatting with my wife about something that involved finances and the business.
No.
And they were recording that screen share session on their end through Loom. And so I realized like a few seconds after the call ended, I'm like, uh-oh. Like I had some fairly sensitive information up in the screen there. I just want to point that out because that's probably the biggest danger about doing a screen share is your notifications. They actually make apps, and I think you can do do not disturb mode and etc. on different platforms to shut those off while you're presenting. But that is one danger of doing that. I want to back up 2 bullets just to the reason why I screen share.
Yes.
And if this happens for people listening, this might be why they might want to screen share as well.
Okay.
The number one phrase I hear when selling SEO, Gaetano, what do you think it is?
How long is it going to take before I start seeing results?
That's the number one question. The number one phrase is, I've been burned before.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, that's definitely the go. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And so you're starting at a -1 for trust. Not in you, really, but in SEO. And maybe for software, people are in a similar situation. Maybe they've been burned before by another software company. When I'm trying to earn trust, I share my screen. Sometimes it's not about what I'm showing. It's just like, look, I have nothing to hide. It's almost like showing your hands, right? I have nothing to hide. I'm going to let you look at my screen. I'm just going to show you, I'll even show them deliverables I've done before, with permission from past clients.
Yeah.
That's a trust-earning exercise as much as it is actually showing them what the work you're going to do.
Right. Awesome, man. So we have another question here. So this is an interesting one, and it doesn't seem like it has much to do with consultative selling, but I think it is relevant. The question is, how can we get a quick response via email from a CTO, a head of technology, head of digital, somebody very important, obviously almost executive level or above, C-level, from folks at the big enterprise? Now, one thing that I've done in the past selling, I've sold SEO as well. I've actually done a high-level analysis of problems on a website, And I've sent that to like the head of search or the VP of marketing. And I said, hey man, I just happened to come across some problems on your site. I would like to provide some ideas on how we might be able to correct this. If you're interested in going forward with the discussion, I would love to get that started. And do you think that would be something valuable or even viable for somebody selling software to do? That's in the audience right now. Do you think that's something that would work?
Yeah, and again, I've never sold software, but I'm assuming it's probably harder. It's a lot higher. You have to reach out to a lot more people, whereas I have like 8 clients at a time, right? So, but I think it's possible. I think with that, this is now outreach. Now we're outreach mode. Now it's just typical sales numbers. What's your percentage of getting a reply from people? I think that's basically what it comes down to. And at this point, this is where the SEO side of me can come in and just recommend testing. Test, all your subject line, all the stuff you sales guys probably already do already, sales guys and gals, sorry. All the stuff you probably do already. But yeah, I mean, I think trying to provide that value, and again, I just want to interject here. This is similar to offering to analyze somebody's data. This is the mistake I see all the time. People think they're providing value, but they're not. They're actually giving more work for somebody. So don't send the CTO something that causes them an extra amount of thinking or friction, or they've got to send something that's easy for them to reply to. Send something where a reply is like a no-brainer for them. I'll give you a quick example. Way back when I was teaching music lessons, I cold emailed a whole bunch of music school teachers to try to get students. And the thing that I found was the number one most important thing was to make sure that there's an absolute reason why that person can get back to you. And what I found in that case was I reached out to them offering that I could teach their students piano lessons, but I also said, I would also love to record one of your school concerts for free. Would you like me to do that? Yes or no? That's it. Yes or no. That's all they had to say. That caused the number one thing to happen that we want to happen in sales is we get a reply. Now the conversation's going. So you have to make sure that you're reaching out in a way where you're not adding friction to the situation, where you're actually making it come across in a way that's easy for them to reply to.
Yeah, no, I love that, man. That's awesome. Yeah, remove all friction, keep it simple, short, and sweet. I totally agree 100% with that. Steve Will also wanted to interject a little something here. He said that he had a prospect that was struggling to provide facts around different marketing qualified lead follow-up cadences. He said he showed them the playbook features and then told them a story of how a current client that had that same problem was solved. So they're showing so basically the idea is take a feature but tie it back to a relatable almost narrative.
Yep.
And that is a great technique when you're doing this. It's not just feature. You got to tie each feature back to something relevant that's going to solve a problem or a pain for that prospect and show how it connects. Would you agree with that? I mean, I'm sure you would, but
absolutely. Cool. And who brought that up, by the way?
Steve Will. So thanks, Steve, man, for bringing that out.
Great point. And that reminds me, there's a formula, a 3-part formula that we put in marketing, but you can put this in sales when you mention story. It's problem, solution, outcome. Right. Most salespeople in marketing start at, here's your problem, here's the solution. The solution's our product. But what's the outcome? What does the outcome look like? And how does it make them feel? Right. And some companies, I have a post where I talk about how some brands do this really well in their meta descriptions in SEO, but you can study this language and apply it to your sales. And an outcome is not oh, you make more money. An outcome is you feel less frustrated, or you feel more in control of what you're doing. I mean, Basecamp does a great job of this in their marketing messaging. So,
when I was at Pipedrive, one of the things that when we uncovered in our customer research that people really were having pain with in sales was organization. They felt that their deals were all over the place. So on the product marketing side, we switched the messaging a little bit to kind of just answer that pain of, okay, Pipedrive will help you keep track of your deals. And that alone was a transformation for us.
Yeah, that's great.
Dan, we also have something here from Ryan Timbo. What's up, Ryan? What the question says is, how do you make sure that the information gets passed on to the correct person, and trusting that so let's say, for example, you don't have you've qualified this account, this target account, but the person that you're dealing with may not be the decision maker, but they are the internal champion, right? The person that really wants to champion you within their organization. What are some tips and techniques and tactics that you might do to ensure that this information was accurately relayed to the powers that be so that you can move forward in that sales process?
Yeah, two come to mind. One is I'll actually just ask at the end of the call, like, hey, I want to send this to you. What's their email address? Can I CC them on it? Just like half the time people will give it to me and I'll just CC, and now you've got your foot in the door to contact them.
Okay, nice.
But number two is whatever it is you're sending, if it's like a demo or if it's like I send proposals, whatever it is you're sending, make it so it makes the person you're directly dealing with look really good. You got to make that person the hero to their boss, right? I mean, like they're trying to like solve their boss's problems. So now you're like, don't give them more work to do, or like don't give them something half-baked. Give them something that really impresses the person you're trying to connect to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's so spot on. Awesome. Yeah, thanks again, Ryan, for the question. Appreciate you, man. Cool. So let's move forward, Dan. It looks like we have the big kahuna question here. Should you talk numbers? I know that in software sales it can kind of go both ways, but what's been your experience in successfully selling SEO services to your clients?
Yeah, so I don't always talk numbers in the first phone call. A lot of times I do now more than not. But I think this segues perfectly off of the last question, which is like, who are you talking to? I try to figure out, obviously, if I'm talking to the junior marketer or like the SEO manager and not the VP of marketing or whoever, I know they don't care about the price half the time. And if I tell them the price, it's just going to like bounce off their head and it doesn't matter. So that's number one, is who are you talking to? Is that person the exact person that's going to care about the price? Do they control the budget, etc.? That's the first step. You know, one quick story is like back when I was like 25 and I was working for my dad, I went out and researched solar panel companies because I had this big grand idea that I wanted to like equip my dad's building with solar panels. My dad didn't even know. I was just like, you know, trying to like do this for him. And the poor guy at the solar panel company, he must have spent 5 hours with me. And then I told my dad, oh, I've been researching solar panels for you. And he's like, no. So, you know, that guy, I feel bad in hindsight, but that guy should have done a little better job to figure out he was just talking to the kid, you know, not the decision maker. Second is intuiting their pain level. So if I get an email from somebody that's like, you know, my traffic dropped, or, you know, we really need to hit these numbers by the end of the year, or they're having some problem, they're further along on that pain spectrum where I'm not going to like waste their time. I'm going to come in more quickly and give them a rough idea of the number, because if I don't do that, I'm wasting their time and I'm wasting my time. So a lot of times I talk numbers when I'm just trying to apply a filter. Like, is this person the right possible candidate to be a client or not? And if I put out a number, if I put a number out there and I'm like, is this roughly even within, you know, what you're thinking? And they're like, no, it's not. Then great. We can just end it right there, and like they can go on their way and go my way. So talking numbers as a filter, I think, is a really good idea sometimes, especially if you are trying to feel out if it's going to be a waste of your time or not. I also find another reason to talk about numbers is if you need to quickly change the tone of the conversation. If you feel like you just need to like wake them up, or like if things are not quite going in the direction you were thinking, sometimes I'll just throw in a price or just start talking about budget as a way to like just kind of get things back on track and kind of wake up the conversation. So it almost has nothing to do with the budget at that point. I'm just using it as a mechanism to like get somebody's attention sometimes. You can also talk budget to convey value. So if I'm talking to a lead where I know they're at like a big brand, or like they're assessing the quality of how I do work based upon my price in addition to other things, well, you're getting the price, you know, you're getting my high price because that's the person that wants to know, like, is this the you know, the high quality service? Is this like the best we can get? So that's another good reason to talk price.
Sure. There's a question here from Sean. He wants to know, how would you ask about budget so you know that you're not wasting their time and that they're not wasting yours as well? I know this can be kind of tricky because you don't want to just start a conversation with what's your budget or what's your ballpark, right? So how do you kind of balance, what are some things that you do to kind of feel where that might be going, and how do you sense that it might not be good? What are maybe some warning signs that you can share with the audience?
That's an awesome question. Two-step process. Number one, I need to make sure I know what they need. So in SEO, they can have as simple as an hourly consulting all the way up to big projects and retainers.
Okay.
If I don't know what they need, then I can't tell them what it is. But once I've nailed down, like, okay, they need an audit, what I say is, it's something like this. What I say is clients typically have paid X roughly in the past for a project like this. I say a very rough number, and oftentimes that number is a little higher, so I have room to go lower. So I'll make up $1,000 right now. I'll say, okay, it sounds like, based upon our conversation, it sounds like you need an audit. You need to have the peace of mind that your website's working correctly. You want the insurance that you're not doing any harm. You want all the best practice boxes checked. In the past, it's been about $1,000 for this service. That's not really the real number, by the way. But, then, because I think the danger you get into, especially in the service business, I learned this the hard way, you don't want to sound like you're just making the number up off the top of your head.
No, that's very bad.
That's very bad. And I'm talking to salespeople, so I'm probably saying something you already all know, but that's something I learned the hard way. But I do try to frame it as like, and I'm very explicit, this is a really rough number, but based upon what I think you understand you need, so I try to keep it a little, ambiguous, but at the same time, getting them in a ballpark.
Yeah, exactly. And like one thing that comes to mind for me is like, I was on, like that, I'll keep going back to the sales demo I was on today. One thing that the rep kind of did okay, but could have done it a lot better was say like, all right, look, in the past, usually how software sales pricing is for softwares, it's usually by tiers and then number of seats, right? So Pipedrive, for example, right, they have like, $12 a seat or whatever, and then if you do an annual price, it's like cheaper because you save by buying it all up front. But I was trying to look for a number because this particular software did not list pricing on their website, and I was really just trying to get to a number, right? And he went into this whole big spiel about like, it really depends on like how many people, what you're using, and he went to this, went to that, and I just straight up said, look, man, I'm trying to get a number figure here. So that I think you got to kind of figure out like you said, what the prospect wants, and then shoot a little bit higher on just a rough sort of ballpark and say, based on deals that we've closed in the past with similar clients like yourself, whether it's 5 seats and a year-long deal, this has typically been the range of what the pricing was.
Yeah. The last tip on this is you need to have something you can say right after you say the budget. So there's none of that awkward, so what I usually am ready to follow up with is I say, your budget's usually roughly this. And then I usually say something like, if that's in your budgeting, if that's in your budget or in your ballpark, the next step would be blah, blah, blah. Or like you have something ready to say after that, or to even change completely if you sense that it maybe went in the wrong direction. So just be ready with a follow-up.
Sure. And one thing to kind of add before we start getting to a little more Q&A is sort of this idea that you can use a script and still be consultative, but if you use a script too much, it feels like robotic if you're asking the same sort of questions all the time. You can't truly be prescriptive in your solution if the script that you're following is the same, and it's not really one size fits all. So Steve, in our audience right now, just wanted to inject something that he likes for his reps to use scripts during onboarding and for a certain ramp period time, so that they can kind of get comfortable with the whole spiel and how kind of the direction of the conversation should go. But once they reach past that ramp time, they disconnect them from the scripts because it does feel formulaic and robotic. And it doesn't quite work in the long term, but it's only good for a ramp period. So I would definitely agree with that as well. Thanks, Steve, for bringing that in.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's like music, right? You learn the song and then you throw it away and jam instead.
Yeah, exactly.
So should we get to the last call? Yeah, the last section, end the call. So
yeah.
Probably the biggest thing I ever learned was when I was helping my dentist. This is like 10 years ago. When I was getting into websites and marketing and stuff, I was helping with SEO. He ranked really well for a while, by the way.
Nice.
When I was helping my dentist, he explained to me that he hired a business consultant. And what this business consultant told him is when the time to, let me back up and explain this a better way.
Yeah.
I actually witnessed this firsthand, so I experienced this. So I went to this dentist one day, and normally what happens is they clean your teeth, they do your fillings, whatever they do, and then the dental hygienist is like, okay, see you later, and you walk back to the desk, or maybe you even just leave because you've already paid. And in many cases, what happens is they just let the client walk away without booking the next appointment.
Right.
Now the trick is, the hack is the dentist now has you book the appointment while you're still in the dental chair.
Yeah.
So like you physically can't even leave.
You can't
like,
say no.
You're physically stuck there.
Yeah.
The hygienist has the schedule, and he or he books your next appointment.
Right.
Now, how I apply this to sales is the way I try to end all of my potential client calls is by booking or confirming the next contact point.
Right.
And it works best if you can schedule a future call with them before you get off the line. Like, oh, it's been great chatting with you. I'm going to digest this a little. I want to put something together for you. Can we book 30 minutes where I can walk through this, these services with you in a few days? And like, obviously, as all salespeople know, the longer that time goes by, like the less chance you're going to talk to them. So I really try to hit that like sometime within the next week. Just, hey, I got my calendar right here. Let's set something up.
Right. And it seems like common sense, but it's actually not, because on the demo that I was on today, the rep closed the call and knowing that there was a next step involved, that we would need to discuss some more things if the conversation were to continue forward. But instead of saying, hey, let's lock something in right now, he was just like, yeah, well, I'll email you a follow-up and we'll be in touch. And I'm like, yeah, great, cool, bye. He's not going to close that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what not to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, and something actually, Sujan Patel, who you've had on this show before, he helped me with business a little, kind of informally for a few years. And one piece of advice he gave me was, you ask them or tell them, hey, you don't just send them the proposal. You tell them you want to send them the proposal by getting on that next call. So they have to, if they want to see your proposal, they have to take that next call with you. And I think that's, if you need to go to like some extreme measure, like, hey, I'm not going to withhold something until they get on the next call.
Yeah.
That's something you do.
Yeah, that's great. With regard to the follow-up though, I would, one thing that I've done that has been really effective is by closing with a statement that says something like, hey, I know you probably get like 200 to 300 emails a day. Is there something I can put in your subject line, in this follow-up subject line, that will help me stand out and absolutely get you to open that email? So like one person said to me, yeah, put like, pizza as like the main thing, and then say follow up from our meeting, just so that it can stand out in the sea of noise. And I find that to be a really awesome and practical takeaway for effective following up. Have you ever experimented with that or tried anything like that, Dan?
I have not. I haven't really run into that particular problem. It's probably, again, slight difference between selling a service and software.
Yeah.
I haven't done anything like that. I think for follow-ups, some of the advice I can give here is when you're actually on the next follow-up call. And so a few tips I can give people is when I'm taking notes from the first call, I'm going to use those notes. I type sometimes I type things they actually say. You can even record the phone call. Sure. Say the sentence back to them they said to you. Like if somebody's like, oh yeah, we worked with this other SEO company, it was terrible, they built these bad links and we hated it and it took 9 months, like whatever it is, just literally say what they've said to you. And oftentimes this works well where you can tell back to them their goals. Like if they get on the call and they're like, well, our goal is really to hit this number by Q4 to like impress the CTO or whatever it is, like I just say that right back to them. And oftentimes they don't remember they said that exactly, and they're like, oh, this guy like really gets what we're trying to figure out. So jotting down some quotes, just saying that back to them. I got that from Ramit Sethi, by the way.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. Also, I make sure that when I'm talking to them the first time is I'm listening out their top concerns, even if it's little, even if it's like, oh, we searched our founder's name and like this article came up and we didn't want it to be ranking. Every little concern, I want to show them I paid attention to the details. So
little details, yeah.
That goes back to listening, and I think this can apply really well when you're selling software. Is like somebody might say this one little thing like, oh, in the competitor's program, like it had this little bug, or I couldn't do this one little feature. Say that back to them because they're gonna know you're paying attention to the little details. So I think that can really, really go a long way. And the last thing I'll say about follow-up or even just chatting in general, my dad taught me this. I'm smiling because I love my dad. He's great. But he had one piece of sort of sales advice for me, and that was say the right things that you know the other person is going to really connect with, but say it in a way where it sounds like you're just saying it naturally. Like, and that might sound simple, but it's really like you almost add a little extra verbal tics, kind of like I'm doing right now. You almost like say it where you just kind of get what they want without being salesy about it. So you actually add in a few casual words. You add in a few stutters. You actually, in some cases,
sound
when
conversational.
When it kind of like I'm doing right now. You know, I'm not just going to say you need to buy this thing because blah blah blah. You know, you're being a little conversational with it. So that's one thing my dad taught me that I remember to this day.
Yeah, I love that, man. I would like to add, too, for people following up, this is kind of a cardinal sin, and I still see it being done to this day, because usually you would think certain things are just common sense, but they're not always 100% common sense. So the one thing that I really hate with the follow-ups, that I even get a lot of emails on this, too, is, hey, I was just emailing to touch base or to check in. When should we connect next? What that sales rep is really trying to say is, hey, did you get a chance to look at the proposal I sent you? Did you have any questions about it? So instead of just beating around the bush, get to the point and just say really simple in one sentence, I'm emailing you because I would like to know if you had any questions about the proposal I'd sent over. Rather than just very vague, hey, just checking in, seeing how you're doing. Like, get right to what it is that you want to know, and I think that's more effective.
Here's another tip. So I mentioned I reached out to Stat, an SEO tool.
Right.
They gave me a free trial. The free trial ran out. I hadn't had a chance to use it. I think they knew that. The guy just sent me a message. I've extended your free trial for you. 2 more weeks.
Oh,
no questions asked. Like, not trying to get me on another call. Just here's another 2 weeks. Try,
That's awesome.
Try it when you have a chance. So I think just something little like that made a huge impression on me, because even though I'm already sort of like sold on the tool, that just showed me that they're really willing to work with their customers and help them, have a chance to figure it out.
Yeah. When I was running content and SEO at Pipedrive, we actually shortened our trial from 30-day to 14-day. And then we realized that, okay, this is actually perfect, because it's not the fact that they tried it and they didn't like it. It's the fact that they didn't have time. They were busy. And that gives us the perfect excuse to get back into their email and say, hey, we extended your trial for you. We hope you have more time to try it this time, and let us know how you feel about it, rather than just giving them this huge 30-day window. They never try it, or maybe they do or whatever, and they just drop out of your funnel and you lose them.
Yeah, that's the undersell and over-deliver, right? No, you've got 30 days to give them 14.
Right.
Then the 15 days are a really good excuse to follow up. I think the last thing I'll say, when I was thinking about the difference between selling services and selling software, I've realized, as I've been doing this for a long time now, my mindset is, even though I provide a service, I'm thinking like I'm selling a product.
Right.
Meaning that I have to have these standard starting point packages. I think when you're selling services, and this is the heart of this whole conversation, you should think, when you're selling software, you should think of it like you're selling a service.
Yes.
And I think that works really well, and that's what I realized Stat did with me really well. We didn't get on the call. They weren't like, oh, so when are you going to buy? When are you going to sign up? Like, give us your money. We just got on the call, and actually BuzzStream did this really well for me too, their SEO and outreach software. Years ago, when I was trying out BuzzStream, one of the account people just got on the call with me, and literally it was like he was consulting me on how to do outreach for like an hour. Like, half of it didn't even have to do with their tool. They were just helping me with all of outreach and PR and et cetera. So I think taking you're selling a service mindset when you're actually selling software is kind of an interesting brain hack to get you in that educational area.
It is. This is the last question of the day before we wrap up. The question is from Bill. Thank you very much. How do we break the cycle of chasing? How do we know when we're beating a dead horse? When do we give up? And how does that whole thing work, Dan? How has that been from your experience?
Yeah, I think it's a little like dating. I mean, if you follow up once or twice and you're not hearing back, I kind of have this, I hate to say it because, when you're selling, you want to try to close as many sales as you can, but at a certain point, you've got to walk away and go to somebody that wants to be sold at a certain point. I think chasing is one of the worst things you can do when you're selling something. It looks bad for the company. It annoys the other person. And half the time or more than half the time when you actually get them as a client or customer, they're a bad client or customer. So
right.
I don't chase. I try to not chase. I try to apply these things like we're talking about, booking the next call, having a reason to reach back out, extending the trial. Those are way better ways to try to eliminate that chasing process.
Yeah, exactly. If I kind of do some social media stuff, man, like if I realize that like they're kind of dark, I'll engage with them on LinkedIn. It tends to be the case now that most people in B2B are super active on LinkedIn.
Yep.
And that's the number one place you can find them. If you realize through the email chain that things are going dark, like and comment on one of their posts or something like that if they're active, and then you can re-spark the interaction that way as well.
Yeah, that's a good tip. I think the one danger with that is some people might perceive that as like you're trying to be sneaky. So just try to think a little about how that might be perceived to the other person. But I think that sometimes people have done that. Like they sent me an email, I forgot about it or whatever. I really don't forget many emails, but if they like something on Twitter of mine or something, it just reminds me that I owe them a reply. So I think that can work well.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Well, we're just out of time for today. I would like to thank everybody once again for joining us. If you have any follow-up questions, you can reach out to Dan on. Let the folks know where they can find you if they want to follow up with you.
Yeah, so I'm very active on Twitter. It's at DANSHURE on Twitter. Probably don't want to email me, but Twitter is a good place to start. You can also check out the podcast, Experts on the Wire. We like Gaetano was saying, it's a SEO podcast. And also doing more on YouTube these days. My YouTube channel is Evolving SEO. And I'm trying to be very conversational there. And in fact, I'm encouraging people, if they want me to answer a question in a YouTube video, to actually reach out and answer that as well. Now, I will say, email me if you really are serious about wanting SEO, because other than that, social or Twitter or YouTube or LinkedIn is much better way to kind of just have a conversation. But I'm always willing to talk to anybody that is having trouble with SEO. So
yeah. Awesome, man. And if you guys want to hit me up, you can email me, Gaetano@saleshacker.com. Go to our YouTube channel, subscribe so that you don't miss any of the webinars. You'll have the video there as well. And, of course, on SlideShare, we upload all our decks. So I would like to thank everybody once again. Dan, thank you very much for being with us. It's been great, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care. Peace.
Thanks. Bye.
Later.